run anything from around 100 mother cows and have a cow-calf operation. We also run anywhere from, depending on the year, 350 to 700 head of yearling steers. Buy steers in the fall and try to sell them in the early part of the summer. We've had real good luck with our steers and our yearlings, not with our health problems. We've been feeding the SweetPro products for about 1.5 years, going on 2 years, and have had really good results with the number of cattle we can run on wheat fields like we're looking at now. These are good fields and cattle would do really good on them, but we've had good results with the medications working good and the health on these cattle, not having to spend a lot of money on doctoring, and we're able to run more. Where we're looking at now, there's right at 200 acres in these fields, and with the SweetPro tubs, we're able to run about 140 head of steers on these fields. This is being a good year, but we start these cattle on the calf starter tubs and gradually move them up through the calf candy to the sweet 16s. And depending on the year, we haven't check weighed these cattle, but they're weighing right at 7. We turned them out around the 1st of December, and depending on the markets and all, I like to keep cattle till in the middle of the summer or so before I sell them, but these cattle may be getting so big, as good as they're doing now, that we have to sell them earlier. We put some cattle on just native grass in the tubs, and they do good on them. We're able to run more numbers than we've probably ever run without grazing our country out, because we're off of it off and on through the year. Whenever we sell our cattle, well, we'll let them rest. We preferably buy in the fall and sell in the early part of the summer, but that kind of depends on the size and how good the cattle do. But I think you can see in the background, these steers have really done good. We got into this deal, we had one horse that we wanted a tub of Equipride to feed to that one horse, and I asked Rick Williams about getting me a 5-gallon can of Equipride, and I ended up with a dealership feeding all these cattle. And it's probably one of the better things I did, and it wasn't my decision. Rick just insisted that I had to do this, and I think it's been one of the best decisions that we've made, is to run these cattle and use the SweetPro tubs. And they any cattle that we have, from the cow-calf operation to these yearlings. And the one thing, part of my background, I worked on a ranch that belonged to some big feedlots up in the Panhandle, and all we run was yearlings, and it was primarily a preconditioning yard. It was a big ranch, but most of the cattle were just there for a short period of time. And at that time, we had a liquid feed plant, made our own liquid feed, and I found out from making that liquid feed out of molasses that the molasses products wasn't working, and I tried feeding some molasses tubs to our cattle, you know, the cows and the yearlings too, and wasn't very satisfied, and was actually a pretty hard sell on somebody selling me to put cattle on tubs, because I thought they were all molasses tubs. And Rick Reeves and I had a pretty good argument over me telling him the tubs wasn't any good, and him insisting that they were. And then we finally tried them, and you know, they have no molasses in them, and it's just really works good, and it's really kind of amazing at how good these cattle do. And they're limited on the amount they eat, so they're not standing there and overeating like they would on strictly a molasses tub. And with these tubs, we're able to get a good gain. We haven't check weighed any of these cattle this year, but at one time last year, we put 80 head of steers on native grass, and when we check weighed them, the gain on them was costing us 45 cents a pound, and they were just on some native grass, just rough grass country. And the 45 cents a pound on the gain. That include the price of the lease on the pasture and the interest and everything we could think of that we'd put into those cattle, and we were still able to put the gain on them for 45 cents. And I thought we were doing good on them. And when we sold those cattle, they sold really good last summer, but they were bigger than we thought they were, because they were weighing a little over 9 when we sold them, and we were trying to sell them around 850 pounds. I watch the markets and study the markets a lot, and what feed will do for me and what it won't do. And like the old saying was, you make most of your money when you buy, not when you sell. And if you don't buy right, you don't make money when you sell. And part of that has to, if the feed you buy, the cost of it's not important, it's how it performs for you. You can buy cheap feed that don't work, or you can buy a better feed that works and be money ahead. And it's just, you get what you pay for. When we buy these cattle, last year we just fed them calf candy starting out, and then moved them up to the Sweet 16s. And this year we started them out on calf starter tubs, and they were walking, balling, just weaned calves when we'd buy them, and they actually eat more and started better on the calf starter tubs. They were able to eat more of it starting out, and then maybe we had them on it a month to 6 weeks on the calf starter, and then we moved them to the calf candy. And now cattle this size, we just put them straight on Sweet 16 until we ship them. And of course, part of it, keeping these tubs out consistently, don't let them run out or anything. And that's the whole secret, I think, to it, is not letting them run out ever, and they regulate themselves back to eating. Last year's, the bunch of cattle we had last year, they probably eat less than a pound a day on the 16 tubs when we had them out, and the gain was really good on it. And I didn't want to change anything. It worked for my pocketbook, and that's what we're all working for, is to make the money out of them. I'm not a hobby farmer. I don't do this. It has to make money, or I'm going to change. One of the things I've noticed this year is the medication we used. Like I said a while ago, I think I'd have to sit down and add up, but I think we put together about 550 of these steers, trying to buy 5-weight cattle, and I think we averaged around 5.5, and we were buying lots of bull calves and having to castrate them. And for some reason I had 2 calves to bleed out, and I lost them. But other than that, out of that 550, I lost 1 more. And done the same old thing, and didn't use a lot of real expensive drugs, and was able to keep the death loss to nearly nothing. And you don't lose many till you go to cutting profit. It generally takes at least on a good year the profit off of 2 to pay for 1 death loss. So it cuts you down pretty fast, and I think part of that is the tubs help the immune system of an animal to ward off some of these, and it also helps the medication to work better that you use when you do have a sick one. These tubs here are the Sweet Pro 16s that we have out for these cattle. They've eaten through about half of these. They're the tubs that we put these cattle on after they get to weighing, 6.5 or so, 700 pounds. And then we'll keep these tubs out until we ship them. We'll have these same tubs out. We try, the reason there's so many around here, the directions say a tub to every 20 head, but I usually put out quite a few more than that. I don't like to have to go put them out. And it's not going to make them eat anymore. It just, without the weather affecting them, well, you can leave them out here, and as they need them, they'll eat them, and I don't have to be running around putting out feed constantly. And instead of putting out 1 to every 20 head, I may put out a tub to every 10, and it just saves me a lot of running and going and hauling feed, and I can come through here horseback and check my cattle and be gone, and not have to haul this feed down here as often. Having more tubs than is recommended is not going to make them consume any more of it. They're still going to eat the same amount. And of course, some of these cattle don't, they're new to the product, or most of them are. And after they get started on it, well, then as we move them up through the other tubs, the calf candy and the sweet 16s, they slow down. And actually, our consumption is probably less than a pound. And in a pound a day per animal. During the good times, you know, it's probably down to around 3/4. And you know, if it turns dry for a while or something or other, their consumption will come up a little bit. But I don't think we've ever been over 1.25 pounds on anything. On even the cows. In the fall of the year last year, before I weaned my calves, they were probably eating around 1.25 pounds or better, and we had the 5-mate 20s out, and but the calves were big enough; they were eating a good bit of it themselves, and the cows were eating it, and you know they were nursing a big calf, and they were carrying a pretty big load with a big calf on them, and it had got dry during the fall, and by the time we could get those calves weaned off of them, they were consuming a good. But that's not a problem as long as you're growing the calf is growing out like it's supposed to. On our mother cow operation, we feed either the 18s or the 20s, and these cattle are really fleshy here. But on our weaning calves, they're growthy calves, big heavy frame calves. They're not as fleshy. These cattle are really fleshy, but they're running on wheat. But we weaned some bigger calves this year than I ever weaned out of those cows. I mean, it's the first full year that we've had them on a Sweet Pro product. We, you know, I don't keep out any salt or mineral. It's just straight Sweet Pro. They depend on it for their mineral supply. And like I say, some of the steers didn't fit with the cattle I was buying because I was trying to buy cattle and trying to average 550 pounds, and the steers we were weaning weighed more than that. They were anywhere from 75 to 100 pounds heavier than the cattle we were buying. And you can see in places where I have those cattle, some bigger cattle in there that you know they'll be sorted into a different group when we sell them, which is fine. But they're the same age as some of their mates there that are 100 pounds lighter, that come off of different places that we put together at local auctions. The good part about cattle can eat a less desirable grass and digest it on the tubs to where they couldn't or wouldn't if they weren't. The cattle that we have running on grass, they're not as fleshy as these cattle out. They'll grow out and be big, heavy frame kind of cattle that, you know, they always dock you a certain percentage if they're overly fat. And with the bigger frame cattle, you know, we get a lot more framey growth out of the Sweet Pro product than we do. You know, it's just not a fat. They just don't get fat on it. They grow a lot of frame and they're growthier kind of cattle. And you don't get docked on them like you do on one that's overly fleshy when you sell them. And you know, the feedlot people, they look for compensatory gain. Where when they put them on a ration, cattle have some catching up to do, and they have a quick gain for maybe 45 days or so. And if your cattle are overly fat, they put them in that feed yard on grain, they may not have a compensatory gain. They may have a period in there where they don't gain at all before they get on their ration and really take off. And they're sure not going to like that. So they'd rather buy cattle, big framey kind of cattle that are you know, healthy and everything, but not overly fleshy. And the calves coming off of cows are always that way. These cattle in the background here, they're pretty fleshy for this time of year. They probably will always be that way. I mean, I don't want them to lose it now that we got it on it, even if we take a little hickey when we sell them from being really fleshy. And they're not they don't have a look to them like cattle that's been in a feed yard or anything like that. But if you sell cattle that look like they've been on a feed ration, they really will dock you. Usually the last few years, and I've kept a chart of it, usually the market on these steers, a lot of people are selling weaning calves in the fall, and we're able to buy them a little cheaper. And this time of the year, which it's around the 1st of March now, if you're planning on making a wheat crop, you're pulling cattle off of it. So there's a pretty good flood of cattle going into sales right now. And then if you graze wheat out, it usually plays out around the middle of May till the 1st of June, and there's a lot of cattle going to market during that time. And we try to hold our cattle another month or month and a half, and then sell them after the 4th of July. And most years it seems like the market kind of comes back during that period of time, and we're able to, in my opinion, which is everybody's got one, it generally works a little better, but at the time it works better for us. Some of these cattle get so big that we may sell them early just to keep them having too big. The trends has sort of changed in the last year to the bigger cattle being a little more demand for a 900 to 1,000 pound steer that doesn't have to be fed so long to get him to weigh 1,200, compared to buying a 750 pound feeder steer and having to feed him 6 months to have him finished. You know, they can just do it in 90 days instead of 180. I was pointing out some hogs across the pasture there. That's one advantage in our country. We have lots of wild hogs, and the wild hogs won't eat these tubs for some reason. Anything else you put out, they'll just wreck your feed. If you put out a self feeder or whatever, they'll just ruin your feed overnight. But it's middle of the afternoon, pretty hot, and there's hogs coming in this field with these cattle, and that's a big plus in our country, because we're just overrun with them wild hogs. I have seen it, and if we hang around here till later, these fields will start filling up with deer. Oh. There's nothing unusual to drive off that hill and there'll be 80, 100 head of deer standing in these fields right here. And you've got to get the wheat in early enough to outgrow those deer before you can make. When it gets up as big as it is now, the deer don't graze it as good as they do when it's the little bitty, just shooting up out of the ground. When we ship cattle out of here, we'll plow these things every time it rains until we sow it in wheat again, which some years we may run a plow through it 4 or 5 times before we go back in the fall. And we like to get all this wheat in the ground. And the old timer said to make wheat grazing, you had to have it up by the 1st of October and up and growing by the 1st of October, and that's pretty well true. And you have enough growing season then before the winter sets in to have it up. And I like to keep it grazed, down, not let it get tall and rank, because cattle don't gain on it as good when it gets big as it does whenever they're about the height that it is now. And if it gets too big and goes to putting out the tillers for the seed head, it'll quit growing. And when a plant puts out a tiller and puts that seed on the head, all of the protein will leave the plant and go to develop that seed, and so you lose the value of what's in the leaf. Like if you're baling hay and you wait till the plant is totally headed out, well then your leaf and your forage matter is not as good as it was before it headed out, because all of the nitrogen goes to developing that seed instead of growing plant.